in Dune Awakening, deciding between rushing to the endgame or taking a more measured approach during your first playthrough significantly influences your experience, especially considering the game's blend of PvE and PvP elements. So today we want to make a comparative analysis of both strategies, highlighting their respective advantages, disadvantages, and potential outcomes. And remember, the only true aspect that matters at this point is whether or not you are enjoying the game. So make sure to choose which path you take wisely. Now, of course, rushing to the end game as quickly as possible has a lot of advantages and disadvantages that an individual is more than likely going to have to think about in terms of what their playstyle entails. Now, first of all, that early access high-tier resource grind is going to be the first advantage that you as an individual will be aiming for if this is your goal, because reaching that deep desert swiftly will allow you to gather rare materials and schematics essential for advanced gear and vehicles, providing a more competitive edge for you. And not only that, you will be gaining the ability to harvest different resources at more than likely a much larger scale than you will inside of the sieges that you began with. Now, how this translates over into why it's an advantage, if you think about it, it will probably take you 4 or 5 hours to grind up all the materials to, say, build your ornithopter. However, when you're in that deep desert and there's no competition because you're there early, you more than likely are going to be able to get all of those in-game materials to replace your ornithopter if it crashes in a much quicker and more abundant way. So definitely getting out there to the end game, this is going to offer somebody a lot of opportunity to definitely at least stockpile materials in a way that is going to put them ahead of people who are slowly taking their time to get out there. That's not to say that those people going slow won't have the same opportunities. However, you will be able to afford to lose more stuff if you're out there early. So it's definitely something you have to think about. Now, the second thing I can think of is just obviously that PvP dominance, because early arrival in PvP zones usually lead to control over things like the spice fields and strategic points, establishing dominance before other players or guilds. During that first week, you're going to be able to test and find what is really important for that end game, and then you can start trying to manipulate the areas and regions that you're in to try to push people off. Now, I don't really think this is going to be a huge driving issue because the deep desert seems to be massive. And if I were running a guild, the first thing that I would do in terms of PvP dominance would be securing the best resources that I can find in this area until we can scrape them all up, and then moving to the next area, because you want to have the armor blueprints, you want to have all the resources so that you can rebuild ornithopters or build bigger machines and things along these lines. So it's always about consuming the resources and maintaining the push off of people, which is really what I think the PvP dominant end of this game is going to be. I don't really see it being one of these seek and destroy necessarily because of the sheer vastness of the deep desert. So it is very possible that you might encounter PvP, but if so, I don't believe it's so hard to believe that you can just run away and probably more than likely find another area of the deep desert that you can grab stuff from. However, getting there first is going to give you that advantage, because even whenever the first 5 days is over and week 2 comes after the wipe of the deep desert, you are going to have everything in abundance ready to pack up with a massive amount of people and manpower to go back out there and just redo it. So the more that you're out there, the more competition that's going to be arising for people who are not rushing to that in-game point. Now, some people might say economic leverage is another reason for like driving deep into that desert. So, for example, securing those scarce resources early and becoming a supplier in the in-game economy is possibly an option that you can be running with here. And this is going to also allow you to create profitable trades with people that are looking for those materials, say to buy or create the ornithopter, that don't want to actually go out and grind the materials themselves. Now, as I mentioned earlier with the PvP dominance, I really believe that Funcom is taking on kind of a EVE Online concept with this deep desert, meaning in EVE you had like high sec, low sec, then you had null sec. Each region had like specific materials that you could only find there to craft and do stuff with, but without a doubt the most profitable and vastness of creating stuff all occurs in that nullsec region. And I believe this is what they're going to be doing with the deep desert. You will be able to find large amounts of nodes in certain areas the deeper you go, which is going to offer you a way better return on time than, say, just sticking around in the Haga Basin or the Siege itself. So that economic leverage is definitely a possible feature depending on how people decide to spend their money once the game begins. Finally, just that whole guild building leadership opportunity that comes up with these type of events, because fast progression can definitely elevate your player status within the guild. Meaning, if you are the first one out there and you are experiencing things, you are reporting this information back to your Discord or whatever form of talking that you guys will be doing, and inside of that, people will start looking to you as more of a leader. So if you have ambitions for trying to reach the end game quickly so that you can have kind of a influence and maybe be promoted inside of the groups that you are in, I believe this will be a very, very serious way that you can jump in there and go deep, and as well just influence the individuals around you and possibly gain those leadership roles just through the concept of knowledge. Because remember, knowledge is power. Now, to every positive, there is possible negatives. It's a choice. Choices can go in many different directions. The first thing that I would say that might be a disadvantage for this rushing to in-game strategy is, without a doubt, content burnout. Because you got to think that rapid progression that you are like pushing yourself through could possibly lead to exhaustion because of all that available content really quickly being thrust upon you results in kind of a lack of engagement of activities and potential boredom once you reach the end game, because we don't really know how exciting or interesting that end game is going to be. There's also the whole concept of PvP exposure. Entering the PvP zones early without adequate preparation could possibly lead to frequent defeats and resource losses, especially against more experienced players. You have to remember, everyone believes they are the best gamer until they're not. And the one lesson I've always learned in life is there's always somebody better than you. So if you are pushing as quickly as you can and not taking the adequate time to determine what it will take to make you, suitable for that in-game PvP realm, you might find yourself dying a lot out in the deep desert, and it's subtracting from your enjoyment of the game itself. Now, there's also the whole concept of neglect of PvE content, because focusing solely on in-game may cause players to miss out on, rich storytelling, character development, and immersive PvE experiences that they just are not going to be able to grasp and relate with other people to. Now, for some people, these points are not important at all. A lot of people just kind of skim through it. I know I do. I don't watch any of the cutscenes. I probably should. Maybe one day I will start if I want to get into the lore, but I personally am not interested that much in Dune lore. I didn't read the books. I just enjoy the game, and I think it's a well-made concept, and I want to experience what that end game has for me, or even the early game and mid game as well. So it's not so much of a, hey, I need to immerse myself in it. I just want to, live the PvP, PvE end game more than I do everything else. But that doesn't necessarily mean everyone is this way. So it's always important to remember you are going to be missing out on a lot of PvP content by rushing through. That's not to say that you can't go back and gather this PvE content later on, but you have to remember at some point everyone's going to catch up, and there might be a massive need for you to always be participating in that in-game PvP struggle in the deep desert, which is going to take away time for you to go back and reclaim that content from the early on stages of the game. And finally, there are just like that whole potential for bugs and unrefined mechanics that we haven't seen. Remember, Funcom just tossed us a drip of water, pun intended for Dune fans. They literally just gave us the basics in this early beta test, which I still believe is more of a demo than a beta test, because we were really compressed on the amount of mechanics and in-game features that we were able to see. And even with that small amount of exposure to the game, we still found lots of bugs and lots of issues with unrefined mechanics just in that system alone. So you can imagine whenever the other 75-80% of the map opens up, that is room for a lot of potential bugs and bad mechanics that are going to be influencing your gameplay. So if you're the type of person who gets very frustrated whenever a bug slows down or crashes you in your progress, you have to remember this is definitely going to be a possibility once you hit that end game. Now, tipping the scale into the other aspect of just taking your time to get to the end game also has a lot of advantages and disadvantages that should be discussed for individuals to determine whether or not this is the path they want to take. So, for example, that comprehensive PvE experience that you will receive by taking your time, exploring the game at a leisurely pace, just to allow yourself to become more immersed in the storyline, understand the character development and the environmental storytelling that goes along with it, is a real treasure for a lot of people. This allows you to feel like you are getting your money's worth in a lot of ways, and you can progress to a point where eventually, if you like the game, it will allow you to catch up to these bigger guilds, because there's only certain tiers of resources that are out there. So getting all of that PvE experience early on could definitely bring on a lot of, included advantages. And one example for this would be you might be able to find gear which is more suitable for the deep desert to help you survive and not just die repetitively over and over again, trying to figure out how to beat your head through the wall of that deep desert itself, which is something that is possible that a person will get by rushing through the game, not taking their time to develop the equipment for their character itself. So, that comprehensive PvE experience is definitely paramount for a lot of people to experience enjoyment in this type of game. Another thing to think about is the skill development, as was mentioned earlier. I mean, the gradual progression that you will be having provides time to master the game mechanics, combat systems, and even, find resource management inside of what you're trying to buy or build, I should say, which leads to a more, competent gameplay experience. It's not just rushed and, failed multiple times until you get the correct answer. The slower you go, the more time you have to process and think through what what is happening. Thus, you can more realistically determine what the resources that you need are, and even you're able to find more stuff in those low and mid-tier game playthroughs, which will, allow you to possibly even have an advantage over somebody in the deep game. Obviously, reduced stress is something as well, because avoiding the rush definitely diminishes the pressure of competition, allowing for a more relaxed and enjoyable game experience for a lot of people. I know feeling like you have that quota to reach and you set your goals for in-game and you rush as hard as you can to get there can be extremely stressful for a lot of people. Other people thrive on this. I'm somewhere in the middle. I definitely feel the stress if I'm not reaching what I need to, especially because there is a specific time allotted to do this. So definitely, taking your time has a clear advantage on the stress end of the spectrum. And finally, the community engagement that is possible by taking your time, engaging with other people can lead to these type of, alliances and forming stuff. You have time to find a guild which is suitable for you. For example, you might not be interested in in-game PvP, and the guild that you're in now is pushing for it so quickly, and you feel like this just isn't my place. This is giving you a time to slowly work through the ranks, and you start seeing other people around you that are doing the same. So the development of, guilds and communities that are more like-minded with you are definitely easy to find once you're taking your time and you're able to look around instead of just looking forward down the pipe to finish the major prospect that you're trying to do. And finally, I think this offers a lot of rewarding experiences for participating in cooperative activities, because if you are rushing to in-game, you're not going to want to stop and go back and do something with somebody. You are always going to try to be pushing forward and advancing as quickly as possible. Whereas whenever you're taking your time, if somebody needs help beating something or completing a laboratory, something along these lines, this gives you the chance to get in there and help the community, and it creates bonds with people. They really appreciate it whenever you're there to help them do these type of activities. So I definitely believe that taking your time does have its positive side. Now, the downside to slowly making your way through the game is seen right off the bat by just explicitly understanding that you are lagging behind in progression, because that slower advancement may result in being underpowered compared to other players, especially once you reach that PvP in-game deep desert. Everyone's going to want to try it. I know that to some extent everyone is hoping for some success in going into the deep desert and finding something that they can do there to advance their gameplay. But there's always that chance that once you get there, it is patrolled by giga guilds that are just going to blast you off the field of play. And they will have a plethora of gear and resources to combat you in many ways. But that's not to say that you can't be sneaky and move around and find your own corner of the desert, but it's definitely going to put a lot of pressure on people that are getting out there for the first time if you don't have something to combat these individuals. Also, there's going to be limited access to high-tier resources. Now, I'm not saying that all high-tier resources are going to be off the table for you. I'm sure, especially Funcom is pretty well known for trying to offer an experience for everybody which is, suitable to some extent. And it really feels like Funcom is leaning into the PvE aspect of this game more than the PvP, so it quite possibly isn't going to be that limiting. However, you will definitely have some kind of competition for mass gathering larger resources by getting out there late, so always keep that in mind. The number one thing that usually comes up with the people taking their time is that potential for spoilers as well. Engaging with a community online or finding the resources that you go through Reddit for and things like this may inadvertently reveal plot points or game mechanics, which is going to kind of diminish the discovery aspect for you as an individual. So you always have to keep in mind, when you're going slow, there is the possibility that you are going to find information that is going to wreck what you are trying to enjoy. So please always keep that in mind. Spoilers are a real thing. And finally, there is that possibility for an economic disadvantage on your end of the deal, because late participation in in-game economies may limit opportunities for profitable traders or market influence in terms of the sheer scale that you are going to be able to operate through. One example of this is the people who get in-game resources first are going to have the advantage of putting them on the marketplace at the highest possible price. From that point, those resources only lose value. So in terms of early game, well, when I say early game, I mean early in-game activities in the marketplace with resources, you are going to find an explosion in price. And it's going to take about a week or so for those prices to start dropping. But by that time, you are just getting into that part of the deep desert where you are now going to be able to sell stuff and try to make profits. You're going to lose out on a huge amount of economic advantage by doing this at a later time. Also, just the sheer, scale of how somebody might be able to sell on that marketplace is also going to be an issue. And with the larger guilds, it might even be possible that they lack the need to purchase things off that marketplace right off the bat. I really believe, if you are interested in the economic side of this game, that it's not going to be resources that you want to try to sell on that marketplace. I believe it's going to be more in terms of the blueprints, because these are going to be things that you can dive into a certain area, extract with it, and sell it. And I think those blueprints are going to be very valuable for big guilds to constantly be refurbishing all of their equipment and armor items, things like this. So keep in mind, I really think the big money is going to be in the blueprints. Now, choosing between rushing or taking a more measured approach in Dune Awakening for the endgame depends on your personal gaming preferences. For example, if you thrive on that competition and you rely on early game dominance, and this is what suits you as an individual gamer, then rushing makes complete sense. However, if you value storytelling, exploration, and immersing yourself with gradual progression, as well as learning the mechanics in the games as you're moving through, obviously taking your time is going to be more advantageous for you as an individual. At the end of the day, we all need to remember that this is a gaming culture and community in itself. So maintaining the health of this community is the fundamental key to the success of all of us having fun at the end of the game. So I hope everyone out there takes time to help people and helps everyone move along through the game in a smooth and comfortable way. However, what do you guys think? Did you find what I had to talk about today of any interest? If so, and you find other advantages or disadvantages, please leave those comments below so that we can discuss them in the comment sections. I love to interact and talk to everybody that I can on these type of details, so please make sure to take time to leave that comment. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell so that I can keep you up to date on everything Dune Awakening and MMO action RPG. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.